Awesome. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rocky. I'm joined today by Joe Brantuk, Chief Client Officer at Nasdaq, and Sehr Thadhani, Chief Digital Officer at Nasdaq. And we're going to talk about public markets today and tomorrow. Before we get started, Sarah, I have to ask you, you had a really exciting morning. Can you tell us about it?
We did. So this morning, to open the market, we invited Gold House, which is an organization that celebrates Asian American Pacific Islander leaders across the country. We had executives, VCs, creatives. We had Miss Universe.
Miss Universe was there?
Yeah, Miss Universe was there. We had the most decorated Olympic figure skater who's also a sophomore or junior at Yale.
I'm feeling bad about myself.
He rang the bell, and then he left because he was like, I have a final. I was like, you have a final? Okay. And it was amazing. We did that to celebrate Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which is May, and so it was an incredible morning.
I love it. I saw it on Instagram. I had all the feels, so I'm glad you could share that with all of us today.
Love it.
Joe, when people think about Nasdaq, they're thinking maybe about company listings, stock market, financial trading, but the business is certainly deeper than that. Can you tell us about it?
It certainly has, and I think it's really been a fun journey, personally for me. I've been there for 18 years, and when I joined Nasdaq 18 years ago, we did two things. We listed stocks, and we traded stocks, and that was it. And today, Nasdaq truly is a global technology company powering the capital markets. But when you think about even how we leverage technology and how we build partnership with our listed companies, that has completely evolved over those last 18 years. Because what we really want to do and what we focus on is really solving problems for publicly traded companies. It is daunting to be a publicly traded company. So we, over the last 10, 15 years, have developed tools to help these companies navigate their investor relations. When you think about corporate governance, you think about board communications, so you think about all these different challenges. It's been a great differentiation for Nasdaq. But what gets us excited and Sehr excited is we spend a lot of time having also developed an incredible marketing organization to help and engage our listed companies on the marketing side. And we certainly, I'm sure, are going to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I was just about to tell you, what does that mean? The marketing piece, what does that look like?
So in the past, an IPO really truly was a financial transaction. It was to raise capital, so you could grow and you move on. But today, an IPO is a lot more than that. An IPO is really a branding event. An IPO is really about building that credibility, whether it's to the customers or potential customers. It's also an opportunity to really think about your engagement and your relationship with different stakeholders. Obviously, investors are an important one, but we work with these listed companies and frankly, these private companies long before they go public to help think about those stakeholders, including employees, for example. What does this mean for employees? How can you make an IPO a special moment for them? How can you educate them about an IPO? And we've also put together on the marketing front, under Sier's leadership, a digital framework or a content framework so we could help be an authentic storyteller for these companies that are coming public on Nasdaq.
Sarah, it sounds like a creative process and a fun one. Tell us about it.
Well, I was just going to say, Joe's been at Nasdaq for 18 years. I've been there for about 18 minutes. I've been someone who's been in many consumer-led organizations, probably 2.5, 3 years. But what I've found incredible is all the work that we do with private companies leading up to an IPO, and even with companies who don't necessarily IPO, is really help them tell their stories, their executive stories, all the visibility around their growth, what they're doing in terms of raising. We have an incredible amount of assets that I didn't really even know could be such a massive and transformational experience for companies. I'll give you an example. So, to contextualize it, I started my career at MTV. I've spent a lot of time at Paramount, Google, all of the sort of culture, buzzy, buzzy is sometimes fuzzy, but buzzy companies. And my third day, Tony Blair's son, Ewan Blair, runs a company called Multiverse. It's in the ed tech space. He had just raised $200 million, I think, and his entire company was flying to Nasdaq because we have this massive tower. How many feet is it?
It's 7 stories. It's a quarter of an acre. There's 18 million little LEDs, but let's not get into details.
It's incredible, and we did this beautiful tower shot and an announcement about their raise, and his entire company flew, and they took photographs outside of it. And for me, I was like, "You're Tony Blair's son,
right?
Like, can't you get?" But it was my naivete, and not really. That was my second day. Now it's 18 minutes plus. It's been a year. So I've spoken to so many companies, founders, and the incredible delight that they experience when coming to the market site, when having their companies featured, experiencing the opening bell like they did today. Like it's like this. It's hard to think about being it until you see it.
It sounds like, though, that IPO moment, with the way you're describing it, is an opportunity for brands and for companies in branding, sure, but in recruitment and retention. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So when we think about, I joke often that when an IPO comes to market and the team and the resources that we bring to bear, we're basically planning sometimes a small wedding, but a big wedding in most cases, where we're able to really think about, experience. And
right.
I'm glad that you mentioned, because we spend so much time thinking about the experiences that we could bring beyond just the capital raise. And so I just want to share some moments, for example, with employees. We learned a lot from the pandemic, and everyone was remote, and we were faced with the challenge, well, how are you going to have this incredible global celebration, and that's so important to the company, but also the employees, and they can't be there. So we're talking about innovation a lot today, and at this conference, one of the things that was unique in what we did is we innovated, and we actually created a experiential app that every single employee from around the world can now download. And when the company, even it might sometimes a smaller group in New York, they're able to actually take pictures of their celebration. So Mobileye went public last year. They had 3,000 employees in Israel. They had all these different celebrations, and they were able to take pictures of themselves with their colleagues and with their families.
Oh, that's awesome.
And those pictures, they're able to, through a click of the app, through an API, those pictures get posted and celebrated on our 7-story tower in Times Square. And then we have cameras across the street that take those pictures and then re-ingest them into the app and share them with those employees. So when you think about something as simple as an IPO celebration,
right,
but leveraging technology and our different marketing assets to bring a unique experience to them is pretty memorable and pretty fun for us to do.
I love that. I love the creativity. I love the immersion. But there's something about that belonging. It creates this deep sense of belonging, right, between the folks who work at the company and the company. Oh, that's so cool. Look, we're here to talk about the future, and we're going to get to the long term and all that good stuff. What's it like right now, sort of assessing the climate for IPOs?
Yeah. So certainly, I don't think anyone would be shocked when I tell them, the IPO market is very, very soft right now.
Right.
In fact, I would argue it's probably closed. But I will leave you with a little bit of optimism. We do see a couple of big deals coming, in June and into the summer. So I think that's very, very good. But where we are really focusing this time, I actually call it a luxury, because we're taking this time when the IPO market is slow to build those critical relationships with many of these private companies that are getting ready to think about an IPO in 2024. And so that's where we're spending a lot of our time. And I would also just highlight that the pipeline is incredibly strong. So there's 152 companies that have applications in with Nasdaq. So they're just ready to go when the market does open up.
Is that globally also?
Yeah, I think that's about right. We're seeing more and more companies, consider a U.S. listing versus others. I think U.S. when you think about an environment that we're in right now, there's sort of we see companies sort of seek out deep liquidity pools, and U.S. is certainly one of them.
Sehr, I know you're working with companies public, private, to kind of realize their IPO goals. What's there beyond the money? What are they looking for beyond that?
I think that, it's really, from what I've seen, it's really changed. As Joe was saying, it used to be that we were an exchange. Now we're doing so many things to partner, from visibility, executive visibility. Companies are really looking for a partner that they can think about like innovation with, that they can think about the macro challenges that they're about to face, that they can, figure out how to meet people who are in their industries, who are able to exchange knowledge. We do a lot of work connecting private and public companies. It's interesting, private companies, it's a little bit more straightforward what they need from the public companies. So private companies, as they look to scale, as they look to grow, they look at the big public companies that they can really, get that growth from and scale and revenue. But public companies also really want intel and market intelligence and signal about what's happening on the private side from emerging technologies, because the private companies are so grassroots. So we're doing a lot of work connecting public and private companies, executives who really want to understand different journey pathing. If someone is taking their company public, there are different stakeholders. The CEO is focused on different things than the CMO, than the CFO. And so being able to connect them to people who have done it before, to understand, what to look out for, how to prepare, how to think about it. We're spending a lot of time in that space, really understanding where the commonalities are so that we can build and we can add value in that way.
What do you think the differentiator is, really for both of you, between a company who succeeds in that process and one who struggles in the IPO process? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think there's the basics, right? Companies that have successful IPOs, the basics. They have the right financial controls in place, they have the right team in place, they have the right board in place. Where we see success, or just sort of that differentiation, if you're comparing the two, is really companies that take advantage of it more than just a capital raise, as I mentioned before. So, being able to look at the capital raise to build that credibility, and actually bring in different stakeholders. So normally, maybe it's just the management team, maybe it's just the employees, but now we have companies that are really looking at this as, this is a celebration and we want to include customers, or even better yet, this could help with our customer acquisition strategy and using an IPO and the marketing and the branding around that to help close business. And then the other thing is, companies, they really look, particularly IPO on Nasdaq, and try and take advantage of that brand alignment. And that's something that it's a great way to authentically tell this story. So I'll just share maybe this story. So we had actually, we had a couple of companies. I was just trying to think which one's the best story in terms of Honeywell. So Honeywell, because I was going to talk about the Hertz one, then
I'm living for your vibe.
Yeah. So Honeywell was listed on the New York Stock Exchange for 100 years, and on the 101st year of their publicly listing, they actually switched their listing to Nasdaq. And there was, we love that opportunity, but when you start to peel back the onion and say why, if you really think about Honeywell of 100 years ago versus Honeywell of the future, Honeywell of 100 years ago is really about industrial, programming and so forth. And the Honeywell of the future is really about IoT and technology and so forth. So we were able to actually successfully, leverage that brand alignment story with our great team to tell a very authentic story around that on their listing day.
I love that. Sarah, I want to talk about female founders, something you and I, and lots of people in this room care a lot about. How many women have taken their companies public, and sort of how do you see that number changing?
It's a great question. We have done a lot of research. It looks like under 30 female founders in history have taken their companies public. That keeps me up at night.
I mean, that's a sobering number.
Yeah, so we've spent a lot of time talking to female founders to really understand what is happening on that path. There's a lot of different things that are possible to change. there are, and I think we think it's a really big market opportunity, especially as you start to look at 2020 and 2021 with so much capital in the market. So much capital flowed to women founders, to Black and brown founders, to API founders, like to every underrepresented community. We've started to hear a lot more of these stories. After the murder of George Floyd, there were a lot of funds that started, like SoftBank's Opportunity Fund. Right. It was a $100 million fund, and now it's become uncapped. And we've spent a lot of time with them, and they were saying that they do not have the option to fail because it is so high risk, because never in history has there been a chance to fund some of these companies that should have been funded, that just haven't had that chance. So because we already spend a lot of time in the early stage companies, we develop relationships with companies along their growth stage. Me personally, being an Indian woman, I'm very interested in finding ways to support founders of color and who are women.
It's something super dear to me too. How do we drive that number up, do you think?
It's a great question. We are obviously seeing a lot more women investors. The really interesting things about women founders are that the entire ecosystem is stacked with women. So you have investors who invest in women-led companies. Women tend to put more women on boards. Women tend to have more women in the C-suite. So it was interesting. For Women's History Month, we invited in the female quotient. And they are an incredible organization that has done a lot of research. They do a lot with corporations to help change the number of women on the public side. And what was interesting is we've been having these conversations that on the private side, when you have female-founded companies that take their companies public, all of a sudden, it's an exponential difference in that ratio. So, is there a world where we can help female founders go public? I hope so. I think there's also, we were spending some time with Blackstone, and they were telling us, because they have a new accelerator that focuses. It's a full female-led team, and they were sort of sharing what happens along the IPO process, the IPO. The roadshow. When companies are taking their basically pricing, there are very few women along that journey. So there is not a lot of representation at many different stages, but it's starting to change. And so, we're really starting to see the difference in just what women are doing. Like coming out of the pandemic, there's so many more women-led companies in femtech, in health tech, in insurance, like in just spaces that there just haven't been. And so I think, the company cycle is long, right? Like you having seen so many companies go public, it's not a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Right. It's really like a 5-10 year. Yeah. So, I think we're all hopeful that we see more women take their companies public.
I think the seeds that are planted today will, be harvested in, 5, 6, 7 years. But I think also just when you think about Nasdaq, we are so proud to be led by Adina Friedman, who, if anyone doesn't know Adina, our chair and CEO, she started as an intern 22 years ago at Nasdaq, and now she's constantly on lists for
she's on every list.
Every list.
She's magic.
She
I love it.
She really is, and this is obviously important to her, and it's really genuine to our culture at Nasdaq, and we're doing a lot around it.
Well, and I think also being intentional, right? Like understanding structurally where there are gaps and where there are opportunities for more representation, and being clear about that. Yeah. Things don't happen by accident, and so that's where
the study and all the analysis that we do, and try and see where those gaps are.
Awesome. Well, Joe, I wanted to ask you a question about technology and sort of how you're utilizing technology, right, for companies who are looking to list on America's largest electronic market.
Yeah, so, it's great. So I think I'll handle that in sort of two buckets. Sure. If I was to tell you Nasdaq is an exchange that 75% of our overall revenue is recurring SaaS revenue, a lot of people, that would be very shocking to them, but that is the reality of it is. So, we are an enabler of, like I mentioned before, capital markets, and spend a lot of time time, half of our 6,000 global employees are technologists and engineers. So we are truly a technology company at heart. And what we're trying to do is help build the solutions and software, to help companies throughout the capital markets, whether it's the capital creation process through investor relations tools, whether it's, board communications tools to bring more efficiencies and security around when boards come together. How do they collaborate and how do they, share knowledge more efficiently than the old days of, printing out paper and putting it in 3, binders and shipping it out, and so forth. So there's a lot that we're doing on that front. But also as we think about, and I started alluding to this before, the technology in the enhancement of the experience. So the app that we have is one example of how we are doing that. I'm also proud to say that last year we were the first exchange in the world to host an opening bell in the metaverse. So we're trying to always push the envelope. And when the team came to me and said, "Hey, listen, this is something that this is something unique and would really represent what Nasdaq stands for and always pushing the envelope," we were proud to do that, and we were nominated for a Webby and so forth, for it. But when you also think about outside the experience, Nasdaq, we're the inventor of and we pioneered electronic trading, right? So in 1971. Every single floor in the world had a floor-based open outcry system. Now I'm proud to say in 2023, every exchange in the world is electronic and uses our market model, which is a competing market maker model. But what's really interesting, right, is 136 exchanges around the world are all powered by Nasdaq. So we not only invented and developed this technology, but now we take technology and we sell it to other exchanges around the world. So it may say a certain exchange on the side of the building, but inside it's it's our technology. And now the natural question is, okay, because we're hearing a lot about this AI, cloud, all the buzzwords that I'm sure.
So fun when you get to just do it for me.
Yeah, right.
Go for it.
So there you go. So we are also one of the first exchanges to ever put one of our exchanges in the cloud. So we announced a big partnership with AWS about 2 years ago, and we successfully launched one of our options businesses in the cloud. And it's remarkable when you start. Now we actually had a little time under this model, and you take a look at the efficiencies that we will be able to bring to to the markets. It's really remarkable. And then certainly AI and being able to bring AI. I think AI, we could sit here for another day and a half and talk about the different the different applications that we see. But one of another unique ways that we're leveraging technology and frankly going into a new business or a different business is we acquired a company called Verafin. And Verafin is an anti-financial crime business. People say, wait, Nasdaq, you're an exchange, but now you're also helping to fight the bad guys. So we are actually, quite successful in helping, track down the bad guys and money laundering, but also, human trafficking, sex trafficking, things like that. And it's really about leveraging AI as a new and evolving technology to. That's
an incredible use for AI as well.
Without a doubt.
I appreciate that anecdote.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go to audience Q&A, but Sahara told me that she wanted to ask an audience a question, so please go for it.
No, all you.
You sure?
Yep.
All right. Well, folks, I'll take some questions if you want, otherwise I can keep going. Anyone have any questions? Go for it right there. If you could just tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Carly, and I'm just curious, being able to revolutionize banking and exchanges with your first digital foray and inventions, what does Nasdaq think about blockchain and basically integrating all of these new systems that kind of self-cannibalize what's happening with banking and exchanges? Because it's kind of like a very similar paradigm shift, I would assume, for
It sure is. We love the technology. Right. Where do we see ourselves actually, creating, in the crypto space or other, different platforms. We will take a approach very much like we took with the capital market. We want to be the engine behind it, providing technology and providing software and tools to help, governance and govern these platforms, as well as provide surveillance around these platforms. So that's probably where you will see us. But again, we love the technology. We think there's great applications for it. And to your point, that is the next forefront of exchanges. And so we just want to make sure that we are very deliberate and taking our time. And I think that's what you're seeing from us.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you both so much. This was a really fun conversation. I'm so glad we were able to be a little bit part of your morning. Sahar, it looked and sounded amazing. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.